So what made you decide to focus your research on diabetes?
Actually, I started with diabetes research very early on during med school already. I have always had a fascination for science and then engaged in basic science and studies on pancreatic islets. But then I started to do practice and to practice medicine and became endocrinologist. I meet type 1 diabetic patients every day. And then I've been more focused on treatment-oriented research more in recent years, actually, because I see their struggle with the diabetes and think that is where I should be.
How would you describe your research?
Actually, it's translational, and that would mean that my research spans from experimental studies to clinical studies, do mechanistic studies to try to understand what really happens in the experimental lab, and then try to adapt that and form that into clinical studies to develop new treatments for type 1 diabetes. At the moment, my main focus is actually on stem cells and try to introduce them into clinical trials and mainly insulin-producing cells then derived from stem cells.
A lot of people feel that diabetes isn't a serious condition. How would you respond to them?
Actually, since I meet type 1 diabetic patients every day, I consider it to affect their whole life, actually. They need to give insulin injections several times daily. They need to measure blood glucose concentration several times daily. They need to think of their diabetes almost every time when they eat, when they exercise and so on. And still they are at a higher risk of late complications, premature death.
What are the biggest challenges for diabetes researchers?
Actually, I think that we need some game-changing treatment, both in type 2 diabetes, where this is a progressive disease. You lose insulin production all the time, despite all new medications that are on the market. There is no one that can change the progressive nature of the disease. And in type 1 diabetes, we have only had insulin since the 1920s. We have improved it a little bit in several ways, but still it is not a disease treated in a way that we can cure it, we can change it. We need to find, for type 1 diabetes, strategies that either prevent or even cure type 1 diabetes.
I'd like you to describe your stem cell work in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, actually, I have been working with islet physiology for many years, and also doing work with islet transplantation, both experimental and clinical work. And from that experience, I think we could meet up with stem cell biologists that now seem to have good insulin-producing cells at hand, but they have less experience in physiological studies, less experience in translational studies. So here we can meet and hopefully we can form something together. And I work with stem cell biologists, for example, at Helsingfors University, and where we then try to find a path to clinic for these kind of stem cells, preferentially actually from stem cells derived from the patient himself, because at best we could use the patient's own cells and then make them into insulin-producing cells.